Here we go. So the first thing we're going to do is fire up Xcode. Actually, before we dive into Xcode, let's fire up Safari. In the event that everybody is not familiar with Vimeo, Vimeo is a company that I work for during the day. It is a company that makes a video platform. It's a platform for hosting, watching, sharing videos, and lots of other powerful tool sets around that functionality. And it's a pretty cool tool. And they have a wonderful public API that allows you to interact with Vimeo content in lots of different ways, you as a developer. And if you go to the homepage here and scroll down to the bottom and click on Developers right here, it'll take you to the Vimeo developer page. This is a place where there's tons of documentation about what Vimeo API functionality is available to developers and how to use it. So you can see some great documentation here, full list of API endpoints, documentation on the API. We'll get into that later, but for those of you that aren't familiar with what Vimeo is, here it is. You can browse to your heart's content. Anyway, let's flip back over to Xcode. When you open up Xcode, you'll see this template. Maybe you won't. In the event that you don't, you can just go to New Project, or you can just say Create a new Xcode project. And that's where we're going to start. We're going to start from scratch here. Hopefully this is familiar at this point, but when you click New Project, you'll be presented with a list of templates that you can use. Just some boilerplate app templates that Apple makes available to us. We're going to choose under the iOS category Application, and we're going to choose Single View Application. We'll hit Next. We'll choose a name for this. Call it anything you like. I'm going to call it Vimeo Staff Picks. You might have to fill in organization identifier. This is usually reverse domain syntax. We're going to use com.onemonth, or I am. You could use com.anything that you want. We're going to stick with Swift because this is a class on Swift and not Objective-C. And we'll stick with iPhone for the sake of simplicity. We also have options of iPad and Universal, which means iPhone and iPad. But for now, we're just going to roll with iPhone. Core data, we're going to ignore. This is essentially a data storage or persistence mechanism, but we're not interested in that at the moment. We will get into things related to data persistence in future courses, future episodes. So hit Next. You will be asked to choose a location for this new project and choose any place on your machine. So when Xcode opens up, we see an interface that some of you may be familiar with. And again, I said this before, we're going to touch on a decent amount of the Xcode interface and functionality, but it is a vast and powerful tool. So we may not get to all of these options here. These are things that you get into when you start working on more nuanced projects. You have specific needs that you need to control with the various things that Xcode makes available. But for now, what we're going to do is sort of roll some things back because Xcode, in choosing the single view application template, it makes kind of generates this project and gives us a couple of things that we don't want to use. And it gives us these things, for convenience, but for the sake of creating a series of videos that is the best learning experience possible, I'd like to get rid of some of that boilerplate code and other files that they give us so that we are really forced to make something from pure scratch. And that means that we will get to know what it is to build an iOS application a little bit deeper than if we were to use some of these things that Apple gives to us. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to delete main.storyboard and viewcontroller.swift. So I want you to click on those. You can click and shift click or click and control click to select both, command click, sorry. And you can just hit the delete key on your keyboard and it will say, do you want to move these two selected items to the trash or just remove the references to them? Removing the references to them means that they will be kept in the Finder, but they will just be removed from the project itself. So we're going to move them to the trash because we're really going all out here. We don't want to use those things at all. That means that we're going to have to do a couple more things. Open supporting files, go to info.plist, and click on the line that says main storyboard file base name. And I want everybody to highlight that so it looks like so, and hit the delete key on your keyboard. And it'll just disappear. That is all that you will see. I may have neglected to mention, for those of you that haven't opened up Xcode before, we'll get into this in much more detail, but I recommend you check out the Hello World course or series of videos that we put together. But just as a quick tour, when you create a new project, any project you're working on the left, something you'll interact with all the time is the project navigator. That's this little blue directory icon here. You will see a list of all of the files that make up your project. And when you click on one of those files, for example, appdelegate.swift, you will see the body of that file here in the main editor area. And this is the area, it's basically a text editor that we use to write code. And these are the two, back and forth between these two zones. That's one of the most common or two of the most common panels or pieces of Xcode that we interact with. So just a bit of background information. So let's keep going. So now that we've stripped out the storyboard and the view controller file that Xcode created for us, let's get to know what exactly we have left and how we're going to work with it. This basically means that we've deleted the initial view or the single view. So we chose the single view, application template, the single view application template. And that means that it comes with sort of this app context that we have left, plus the single view that's sort of a blank slate for us to build on top of. But we've gotten rid of that. So we really just have an application that does nothing at the moment, and we can build on top of that from true scratch. So before we go any further, let's run this application in the iOS simulator. And for those of you that haven't done this before, I recommend you check out some of the earlier sessions. But up here, you can select any connected device, or you can select any iOS simulator. We're just going to choose iPhone 6, which is already selected for us. And we're going to hit this play button up here. And that is going to build and run our app in the iOS simulator, which is essentially a virtual device. And you'll see when it launches, you will see our little launch screen.xib here for a moment. And this is an interface builder file, something that we'll get into a little bit later on, that is shown during the brief moment that the operating system is launching your application, but just before it hands control over the experience on screen to you, the developer. So this is sort of an interstitial that's displayed while the system is sort of preparing your app, launching your app. Then when the app launches, you see this black screen. So that is the true blank canvas that we're about to build on. This app does nothing. It's like being in outer space. You're in a black hole. There is literally no user interface here present for us to see. But when we're in the simulator, if you go up to Hardware Home or you hit Shift-Command-H, it will minimize your app. And you'll see that on the desktop here, we have this little placeholder icon which has the name of our app beneath it. And if I click on that, it will launch our app, which again brings us to this black hole state. So just so you know, if you hit Home or Command-Shift-H, you can see that our app, if you hit it twice, you'll see the little multitask bar here. You'll see that our app is here. It's just that unlike this Hello World app that we made in an earlier session, there is no user interface. It's just a void, which is pretty cool. If you hit stop, it'll kill the app. You can leave the simulator around or quit it or hide it. So now that we've done that, we basically have confirmed that ripping out the storyboard and the view controller file leaves us with a true blank slate where no interface is present. So what we want to do next is start to write some code. And we're going to do that by understanding what this appdelegate.swift file is. And this is the only code file left. It's the only code file that we really need to keep around in order to build this app. So let's get into that next.